right, here we go, y'all. Join us now is the one and only to the break of dawn, Dawn Montgomery, and the managing editor at the Chicago Defender, Tacuma Roeback. Hey, how y'all doing today?
Good.
Doing well, doing well.
So listen, um, let's talk about something I want to talk about, the Final Four. Now we got the Page Bookers, the Juju Watkins. That showdown lived up to its hype. LSU, Iowa rematch. South Carolina hung on to stay undefeated. NC State pulled another upset, and now the Final Four is set with storylines about Caitlin Clark trying to add to her legacy by trying to bring Iowa its first national title game. But of course, South Carolina Dawn, what Dawn Staley is doing down there is just been incredible. But really, the my storyline, guys, and I know you got your own storylines. We want to talk about your storylines more than mine, but my storyline is this: with everything that we've seen with ladies with women's college basketball in the finals, it used to be that we talked all the time about the men's final four. Not many people are talking about the men's final four. The women have taken center stage. Dawn, I'll let you take it from there, and Takuma, you can jump into.
It's amazing to see them take center stage because that's where they should have been all along, if we're being honest. Like, or it should have been a level playing field or a level watching field to where everybody had access to see them play. Okay, because that's one of the biggest things that came out during the conversations of watching these new male fans watching this sport, bringing their opinions and their thoughts to what they feel as if has contributed to the growth of this sport. But if we're being honest, there was a reporter who mentioned, or a very seasoned journalist who mentioned that it only took ESPN over 5 to 7 years to get to a point to where it would publicize these games. Now we're talking about throughout the season. We're not just talking about tournament, but we're talking about throughout the season where you've had women's basketball fans consistently asking, and if I've got to put up front on the front lines of those fans that have been asking for more representation, more televised games, more coverage from journalists and sideline reporters, that has been Black women who have jumped up and asked for more representation on television. So the fact that people can see it, there was, I call it the MNBA, men's NBA. I mean, anyway, it's funny to me because we got the WNBA and the MNBA, but whatever. But there were MNBA games. There was baseball games on last night, but you didn't see anybody talking about those things because everyone was stuck on these
And Dawn,
two
wait, there
games.
was also not in addition to that, there was a no hitter pitched in Major League Baseball as well. But
Come on,
again,
come
right
on.
to your point,
No one was really talking about that. So I just think that it's a beautiful thing to witness, and I love that you did point that out. But I think the rebuttal for that would be like you're starting to see more of the white male sports fans who are jumping into the conversation of women's basketball, talking about, well, if it wasn't for Caitlin Clark or if it wasn't for Angel Reese, then none of us would be watching this game. Okay, that may be true for you, but
right?
there are other sports fans or women's basketball fans who have been watching this for over 10 to 20 years, who have seen this game progressively grow to what it is. And they have ESPN had no choice. Like when you keep
Right.
knocking on somebody's door asking them to change something, and you keep showing up and you're picketing at every opportunity, you have to make that adjustment and you have to meet the demand of the fans because the money is there. And so I just think that it was an amazing thing to witness last night. And I just want, some of the newer male fans, like, get through your first tournament, like
Yeah.
get through your first Final Four, get through your first national championship before you really start trying to contribute some certain, like, I don't want to say male ego driven opinions, but it's pretty much it's there. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
I'm just gonna be honest about that because it comes off it comes out very uninformed, and it comes
Mhm.
off as if it wasn't for just two people, we wouldn't have what we have. And literally, Stacey, in your opening, you mentioned four other players. That's about six
Mhm.
players in total that we could actually be having a conversation about growing this game the way that it has been.
Yeah, and Takuma, everything Dawn said, I can certainly echo, and want to get your thoughts on the same thing, that the ever growing popularity of women's basketball, women's college basketball?
I had this conversation with my barber recently about that old school March Madness feeling when we had conferences like the Big East, where we had programs that were iconic with iconic coaches and players. You had Jim Boeheim at Syracuse. You had Coach K at Duke. You just had all these figures. Dean Smith at North Carolina, and you had players who weren't incentivized back then to leave early to pursue the NBA. So some time to kind of with us. And I'm not against the one and done rule. I think that if players have an opportunity to capitalize on their talent, they should pursue that. But I think with the women's game now, with name, image, and likeness deals, our women stars are staying longer. We're getting to know them. We're starting to see these iconic programs emerge with Dawn Staley, with even the Dawn Staley, even this coach at Stanford, I can't think of her name right now. You're seeing these iconic programs, Gina Oriema at Connecticut, and it's giving me that old school feel where you have villains, you have kind of the quote unquote great white hype. Although I will say to you that Caitlin Clark is incredible. Um, but I think the reaction I saw some for people who wanted Iowa to lose was the same reaction we had back in the days where we wanted Duke to lose everything. We couldn't stand
Mm.
Christian.
Can stand Duke, right?
So it's just a joy to watch. And for anybody who wants to do the revisionist history thing, what happened yesterday would not be possible without your Cheryl Millers, your Lisa Leslie's, your Dawn Staley's, your Tamika Catchings, your Candace Parkers, and your Maya Moores, and a whole host of phenomenal women's basketball athletes from back in the days. So I just wanted to say that, and it's just
Yeah.
awesome to watch.
And Dawn, I gotta bring this up. I talked about
Mm-hmm.
it on Let It Be Known on Tuesday morning, but I
Mm-hmm.
gotta bring this up. Um, so we know the challenges that women athletes, women in general have, right? Especially
Mm-hmm.
women of color, black women.
Come on.
I'm gonna be specific, black women, right? The
Right.
Los Angeles Times
Oh God.
um,
Oh,
had to basically retract a piece that its columnist who covers UCLA basketball wrote. But just in a nutshell, he referred to LSU as,
Mm-hmm.
quote, dirty debutantes and,
Mm-hmm.
quote, Louisiana hot sauce.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had my say on that. We had our say on Tuesday morning.
Mm-hmm.
I, 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 I thought about you immediately
Mm-hmm.
because I said, Dawn is the person to get a response from.
Mm-hmm. He's a piece of crap, if you ask me, because I can't say what I really want to
Oh,
say.
yes. Yes. 100%.
But that shows you what men like him think about us. Now, as much
mhm.
as there were white male sports fans who were coming, and like I had a few that attacked me last night because I wouldn't be specific as to who are the former college women's basketball players that contributed to the game. You heard Tacuma like name off numerous players, but if I was to name one who was active on social media, who gave credit to Caitlin Clark, who gave credit to Paige, who gave credit to wherever credit needed to be given, it was Shamika Holdsclaw. A lot of us remember when Shamika Holdsclaw came into the sport and she did her thing. Now, I'm saying that because when you see a journalist, label someone like this and reference a group of young black women, what do you think they said about Shamika when she came out?
Hmm. Hmm.
What do you think they said about Sharon Miller when she was playing ball? We had a lot of people that was questioning her gender, if we're going to be
Yeah, we
frank and
did. Yes.
100 about it.
Yes.
So, as
Absolutely.
far as I'm concerned, this is one of those things where as the game progressively grows, the critique, the criticism, the racism that comes with it, the just how people see us publicly and just really hide behind whatever their positions are, we know that currently right now there are a lot of things that are being reversed in regards to after how affirmative action was handled by the Supreme Court. We've got judges, lawyers, state representatives, legislators as a whole that see us as dirty debutantes and Louisiana hot
Mhm.
sauces. And to me, that's frustrating because they're telling you who they are. And when they show you who they are the first time, believe them. And as far
Mhm.
as I'm concerned, this also shines a light because you know I'm gonna go here. Miss
Mhm.
Glitter did not come out and
Oh, yeah,
actually
we're gonna get to that
she
too.
no,
Yep.
I know, but let me go ahead and tag
Mhm. Go
that real
ahead. No,
quick.
go ahead.
She did not directly come out and say something towards the racism that he was spewing in that article. She
Yeah, she
said
was
something about
concerned about whether or not
misogyny.
the Washington Post was
Come
doing a
on,
hit
come
piece
on,
on her.
come on with it. And
Mhm.
so, what further tells me about her as a person, because we've talked about her character on this show before. We've talked about some of the things that she's done before, even before the season had started. How she treated Angel Reese was sideways, but she was
Mhm.
able to like leverage that to her advantage. But as far as I'm concerned, this should show other recruits like this probably isn't the woman who you want to play for. You know, we've named other coaches that you could possibly go and play for that would really stand up and support you when
Mhm.
these things happen. We need these people to be true allies when these journalists say the things that they say, when fans do the things that they do. Because if we're honest, you know, Caitlin Clark didn't ask for our fans to be MAGA or alt-right, right? They just are. So lo and behold, with Caitlin Clark, we're gonna have to deal with the Trumpers. We're gonna have to deal with all of these people that are gonna come
Mhm.
behind her, rooting for her because they see it as a race war. They see it as an opportunity to say, "Oh, those black girls can no longer play because we do have our great white hype."
Mhm.
Okay, good luck. You know what I'm saying? So,
I
as
wish you
far
the
as
best
I'm
of luck.
concerned, call that man out for who he is. Do not give him a like. He should have been fired if we're going to be 100. Because let a black person do that towards a Caitlin Clark,
Yeah.
they would have been gone.
And so here's the thing too, Takuma, you're the managing editor. Now, the Los Angeles Times, of course, they don't have the resource problems that we have, that black media has. So where I'm going with this is this. Um, you have the columnists, you have an editor, you have a managing editor, you have a copy editor, et cetera, et cetera. They have all of that. The fact that it got through all of those channels, it got through all those benchmarks. That means that everybody at the LA Times is complicit. All of the decision makers at the LA
Get
Times
rid of everybody.
agreed with,
Get
with,
rid
with
of.
characterizing these black girls as Louisiana hot sauce and dirty debutante. You're the managing editor, your writer, Tacuma, writes a piece about, say, Iowa and says, white trash at its best. It says, they put raisins in their potato salad. I mean, what are you going to do when you see that copy come across your desk?
I'm gonna not. I'm not gonna run it because first of all, any journalist worth their salt. We don't succumb to stereotypes or racism on either side. We tell us the facts as it is. I think the LA Times issue is concerning, given the fact that they had layoffs where late last year they lost so many journalists of color. There should have been, you could tell in spaces in sports media, there's not enough diversity, equity, and inclusion in the coverage, point blank. And they should not have let that piece come out the way it is, in my opinion. And it's just a sad state of where we are with our news media, where there's an erosion of talent, there's an erosion of knowledge, because I think it's very important to have editors who can provide a proper historical context on things to check things from stuff like that happening, from copy like that getting through. So it's just troubling to me, and I would never allow anything like that to come from the Chicago Defender. I think we're better than that.
Absolutely. The black press has historically been better than that, despite the overt and rampant racism that we've faced for all of its 197 years. So a great point there, of course. Dawn, so let's get into more of as we talk about the women's basketball, and we can talk about the men too. The Final Four is coming up for them as well. But I want to talk about Kim Mulkey because um, LSU did lose, and not to make any excuses, and they certainly didn't. Angel and Flojo, none of them made excuses, right? They lost, they lost. But when you have those distractions, and then you have a coach who's all about Coach. It's clearly Kim Mulkey is about Kim Mulkey and Kim Mulkey only. Um, like I said, concerned about the alleged hit piece that she was, uh, making calls all around the country for the past couple of weeks, trying to figure out what they were saying and attacking them left and right, and worried about her image. Um, how much of all of that, and then you get the L.A. Times doing its hit piece and against the girls, the young ladies, and she really did not come out and defend them at all. How much of that because again, one of the things Angel Reese said afterwards,
Mhm.
actually, it was her teammate said that the crown Angel Reese wears is
Mhm.
It's
heavy.
heavy.
It's very heavy. And you have to also think about, we've talked about this early on about her career and how people have tried to humble her. The way sports fans try to humble young Black athletes is astonishing. And that's across all leagues. But when it came down to women's basketball, how dare she show up Black and beautiful? How dare she show up and command her competitors to trash talk? You know what I'm saying? Get hype about the game, like meet her board for board, on both ends of the course. How dare she do that and do it beautifully? Like, to be an attractive Black woman, like, because that's a
Right.
whole nother conversation with pretty privilege, if we're to discuss about that. Because if she had been a less attractive Black woman, we know that the dogs would have been out way
Right.
sooner. You get what I'm saying?
Great
So,
point.
but the biggest thing to me is that what this article did was, is it shined a light on a villain. It shined a light on a villain. And it shined a light to a point to where there were some people who were like, oh, okay, now I get it. Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That tracks. That made more people actually root for her versus allow her to still remain in that villain role. I don't care. She could, child, let me tell you, I'm gonna be at the Lord's gate talking about, I didn't like that glitter lady. I just don't, like, and that's just me because if she's one of those coaches where you downright see how she treats her players, and when it's convenient for her to speak up for them, then she says something, but she says something in a way where it's kind of combative. Like, I wish they had a came at Angel Reese. I wish they had a did
Hmm.
X, Y, and Z. Like, girl, what are you doing? We don't need you
Right.
wishing that between two teams or players. Like, you shouldn't be adding fuel to the fire. And as far as I'm concerned, I didn't read the full article because I'm gonna be honest with you, when I saw the writer from the Washington Post that was actually doing the article, I knew it wasn't gonna be no hit piece. Like, he doesn't have that type of writing in his repertoire to where he would want to target her like that.
Right.
And I feel like she owes him an apology. She needs to
Oh, without
publicly come
question.
out and
Without
tell
question.
him thank you for
Right.
not
Right.
writing what I thought you were going to write. Because,
Right.
baby, one thing that she did do is the people that do want to write something negative on her, they're digging. They're digging right now. If they weren't digging beforehand, they're digging right now. And as far as I'm concerned, it further allows me to expand my thinking about her to where, because I definitely don't lose sleep on her, but I do think about, what made her be so, like, brash and mean towards journalism. She went full MAGA in that press
Yes,
conference.
she did.
Like, fake news, fake
Hmm.
journalists, going behind
Yes.
her, attacking me.
And
Woe is
Kent
me,
Babb.
the white woman, who's being attacked by journalists. Girl, bye.
And Kent Babb, the writer of the Washington Post article, is a decorated journalist,
Mhm.
multiple
Love his work.
awards, acclaim work, and for some idea, some reason, he doesn't do hit pieces. Let's just say that he doesn't do hit pieces, and for some reason, perhaps it was just another reason to make something about her. And again, I just think that Tacuma, I just think that these distractions bleed onto the court, and you're in the NCAA, the Elite Eight. Got enough pressure. The young ladies have enough pressure. I think this bleeds into that and onto the court, and it certainly affects the performance. We see it with pro athletes when there's some sort of major controversy, some sort of scandal, it affects the play on the court.
I totally agree with that. And I think that we saw that. I think the LA Times was an opportunity for the coach of LSU women's basketball to step up and intervene on behalf of her players. Haley Van Lith did what she didn't do, in my opinion, by stepping up there in that moment and sticking up for her teammates. But that should have been Kim Mulkey's job. And I think that people are digging. I have watched basketball for years. I am not a coach. Kim Mulkey has probably forgotten more about basketball than I will even know. But a question that I had from that game was how come Flau'jae Johnson wasn't guarding Caitlin Clark sooner?
We
Um,
all need the answer to that question.
yeah, that,
Uh-oh.
that's my question. That's another point of criticism. Not only her not stepping up on to the fore for her teammates, which I'm sure that played in the back of their minds, and then also some of the strategy stuff that did not take place. Again, from my opinion, just an observer, that would have maybe tilted the odds more in their favor.
And one moment, Angel Reese could be seen on the court
Hmm.
um, saying, "Give me the ball."
Yeah.
Pleading
Right.
with
And she
Tim
was
Mulkey
playing.
to give me the
Right.
ball.
And she was playing her, you had some sports fans who wanted to see Angel take a rest, but there were 2 points that were made. A young lady, Natalie, she's a show producer for Brother from Another podcast. And she pointed out, in the moment that you see an athlete like that down and you give the injury time to rest, it makes it worse for them to try to get up and play. So
Right.
in the moment that she's asking you to trust her, someone who's
Hmm.
gotten you a championship already,
Okay, earn
go
that trust.
go ahead and do that, because it's not like she doesn't have some decent health care and she ain't got some money to pay for. You know what I'm saying? For whatever could come about for her playing on it. Like, let's be fair. Both things can very well be true, but also in the moment of, Haley not being able to guard Caitlin, why would it was stated that Haley was sick.
She
She had
was.
got an
Yeah.
IV before the game,
Hmm.
and you just all of a sudden thought that it was okay to put the sickest person on your team on the one person who all Caitlin does to me is run and shoot. That's it.
Hmm.
That's all I see. To,
Hmm.
to me, she's the greatest scorer in women's basketball. That's it. I can't give her incredible. I can't give her dominant. I can't give her all those things because I don't
What if you
see her.
body up? Body up.
That's it. But you're gonna put the sickest person on this young woman who she has the energy. That's all they do. They run. And we've known this for years about this Iowa team. And
Yeah.
so when it came down to cardio, Haley wasn't the person to put on her. And then when you decided to make the adjustment to put Flau'jae on her, it was a little too late because Flau'jae was
Mhm.
in foul trouble.
That's right. That's right.
So this brought up another conversation, which we don't have to go into because it is a hypothetical, and it could be just my thought process. Like, who told you to tank this game or to lose this game in a way to where it allowed Caitlin and Iowa to advance?
MAGA. The MAGA
Like,
folks.
because if we're gonna name a thing for a couple of minutes there, it looked like some point shaving because every time, unless you could get closer to, gaining a lead, they would fall back at least six. Like, there were
You
multiple
know,
times when that incident happened, and I was just like, you know what, this is really looking like old boy from Blue Chips who was point shaving. What his name, Tommy or something, and he was point shaving, and he was just trying to meet the spread, coach, just trying to meet the spread. No, we don't need that in women's basketball. We don't need
but
that.
Dawn, let me say this. You brought that up, that point shaving stuff, Tacuma. Dawn, I read an article 2 weeks ago. Mike Lupica, New York Daily
Oh,
News.
yeah.
I've been reading him since I was a child,
Mm.
and his Sunday columns. He has some really classic Sunday columns. That's when his column appears on Sundays. And he wrote a story. We were talking about the Shohei Otani situation, right? But in that article about Shohei, he talks about sports and gambling, right? And he said, and he had a quote. a quote from Bernie Bickerstaff, Cleveland Cavaliers coach.
Right.
And Bernie said that he has been told on several occasions that regardless of the score, on some games he has to keep his players, certain players in the game because, quote, of the spread. Now that doesn't sound like
No,
something is wrong. That
it
doesn't
don't.
sound like gambling and sports having this, being strange bedfellows.
Hmm.
Something's wrong there when you have, and it was just a throw. It was almost a throwaway quote, and I'm looking at this, and I had to go back and read it like 4 or 5 times to make sure I was
Hmm.
reading what I thought I was reading. And
Hmm.
nobody has made a deal out of this.
Nobody has made a deal about it. No one has pointed out that there's a possibility that this happens in women's sports. It's almost as if like people don't understand that there's actual state legislation in place to make gambling, legal, which in my opinion, regarding sports betting, I think it does benefit each state depending on where you are. But in general, there's a whole market for something like this to happen. So the reality of saying and naming something like this isn't too far fetched,
Mhm.
especially if it comes down to not even just dealing with a player, but a coach being advised to keep certain people in because of a spread that they have been made aware of a week before or 2 days beforehand. Because if we're going to be honest as well, there are certain boosters for certain programs who
Mhm.
are at the forefront of some of these spreads, trying to make sure that they're gaining their money back. And we've got NIL to deal with. We've got all of these other things to deal with. So there's a lot of money under the table that's still happening, even
Mhm.
with us having NIL deals and all of the things on top of the table. But under the table, there's still this thing of like gambling or doing it in a way to where no one knows what we're doing. If I'm being frank, because I'm gonna bring in college football in just a moment, I
Mhm.
really feel like that's part of the reason why Coach Saban retired. It wasn't just because he was tired. I don't think that it was because he just couldn't handle NIL. No, you all could no longer, compete recruiting wise with other programs who are actually doing things on top of the table. Y'all so
So,
used to doing things
Dawn,
under the table.
Dawn, and
Mm.
before you go on, and Tacuma,
No, I'm
you
done. That
weigh
was
in.
it.
Well, here's the exact quote. I had to pull it up just so you guys will hear the exact
Good,
quote
good.
from
Yes.
Bernie Bickerstaff. He says, quote, "There is no doubt about it that sports gambling has crossed the line. The amount of times where I'm standing up there and we may have a 10-point lead and the spread is 11 and people are yelling at me to leave the guys in so we can cover the spread. It's ridiculous. But
Yeah.
again, I understand the business side of it and the nature of the business of it. But I mean, it's something that I believe has gone too far."
Yeah. And I feel like the reckoning is coming at some point. I think the big question is how's it going to be covered? Because let's look at the contemporary sports media landscape. A lot of these content companies are being funded by sports books, right? Um, whole podcast networks backed by sports books, right? Sports betting. So I think that's the problem that's going to come to a head. And it is bleeding into the game, especially how players are being treated. We saw one iteration of that with fantasy football, but this is on an entirely different level when you talk about these prop bets and these parlays. And when is it going to come to a head? What is it going to look like? And I don't know if the leagues are quite prepared to deal with it.
Well, yeah, they've probably bitten off a lot more than they can chew. I know we're talking basketball, but just to complete this, I mentioned Shohei Otani, and it's interesting to me, Dawn and Takuma, how that situation has gone radio silent. Um, four and a half
Colin.
million
Yeah.
dollars from
Mm-hmm.
this guy's account from an interpreter.
Colin. Mm-hmm.
Come on. This is not his accountant. This is not his legal guy. This is not, somebody who controls his bank accounts. He his signature is on those wires, and still to this minute, We're talking $4.5 million to this minute. There has not been a police complaint filed against this interpreter for stealing $4.5 million.
Mm, mm.
So
Yeah.
give me a break. Sports betting. Pete Rose was banned, and I'm not a Pete Rose fan. I could care less that he's not in the Hall of Fame, to tell you, to be honest with you. But he was banned for life for betting on baseball. Um, but the now we, like as we said, FanDuel and all of the, they are just ensconced in the games. You know, it's so hypocritical, Takuma. It seems hypocritical anyway.
Baseball, the MLB has an interesting quandary. Shohei being their most globally marketable player, probably the best player in the league, if we want to be honest, based on his gifts. He's a phenomenal talent. Um, they, if he were to be banned even for a season, what would that do to a sport that I love, but when we really look at the landscape of it, has fallen behind. This isn't the 1980s and 90s when MLB was number one. You're having a sport that's losing a lot of market share, and for their most marketable star to be hit with something like this is beyond the pale of Pete Rose for sure.
It seems to be. It seems to, now let's be clear. The allegations on Pete Rose, that he signed off on,
Hmm.
that he bet, he was the manager at the Cincinnati Reds at the time and bet against the Cincinnati Reds. It can't get any more egregious than that. But you also have laws in place. This guy paying a bookie, which is illegal in the state of California, having it wire transfer. Now you have some federal crimes there, right? You What happens when that player that's been in the league just a couple of years, he's not as highly touted as a Shohei, when he wires a couple of million to a bookie? What happens when his assistant wires a couple of million to a bookie? I mean, let's be real, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I want to get back to, don't want to get too far off track. I want to get back to college basketball, particularly the women's. Not enough, I believe, Dawn, is said about your namesake down in South Carolina. Um,
Of
Talk
course.
about Dawn Staley, if you will, and really, for those who just don't know, make sure that when you're done, Dawn, now they know.
Dawn Staley is the ultimate dream coach. Has played, basketball throughout her formative years, elementary, high school, college, professionally played, Olympian, like done all of the things, and decided to come back to the game to give back, to groom the next generation of ball players. She's somebody who she stays after games, after doing press conferences, being in the press conferences, whether she's on the court or she's, behind the scenes in the arena. She comes back out to take pictures with families, fans, anybody that's still in the stand that came to watch them no matter where they are, whether it's at home, whether it's an away game. Like, she's somebody who, at every opportunity that she gets, she credits what other ball players are doing at other programs. She gives shouts out to other coaches at other programs. There's no other coach that I've ever seen, maybe a Pat Summit, but we all know Pat Summit had that dog in her. You know what I'm saying? Pat Summit ain't care about nobody. And she was a joy to watch because her fire, you see that in a Dawn Staley. And it's that new age. She's got swagger. She's got rappers paying attention to the ball game. Plies went to one of their home games in South Carolina and brought a toaster because it was something to like kind of mark some things that the fans were saying, about one of the ball players on the basketball court, which was a good thing. Like, it showed his connection to paying attention to the fan base and not just jumping on a bandwagon, right?
Right,
And
right.
so Dawn Staley does that. And what Dawn Staley also shows us is this is how you can show up for other Black and brown people in these public spaces. She shows up fully as herself. She allows her players to show up fully as themselves. And at the end of the day, she's always going to give glory to God because she knows why she's here. She's working in her purpose. And as far as
Amen.
I'm concerned, that's one of the top storylines that should be
Mhm.
talked about is her rise to success and how meteoric it has been. And also in comparison to, the other coaches who have still been around, who are still winning, their games and stuff like that. Like, let's talk about the new crop of coaches that's coming up challenging the game. Let's talk about the new coaches who are allowing these players to be their silly selves. She had a whole part of her press conference talking about how she deals with her players and she allows them to be silly. We got to remember that these are young people. They're still
Right.
young people. They might be
Mhm.
21 years old, but mentally they are still young people. They're still young adults. And
Right.
so allowing them to really find their connection on and off the court to where it's not making the sport a business. It's still something fun that they enjoy doing. And as far as I'm concerned, she makes me want to put on some shorts. Now, mind you, I wasn't your best shooter. I made my free throws though, but I'm your girl for defense. Like I can get some charges for you, Dawn. I'm your girl. But overall, she's that coach that brings that swagger that would attract like the male watcher who's gonna be like, you know what she got on is fresh. How
Mhm.
she's dealing with them. She's got that dog in her because she's calling them out on the spot, like she's handling it. And I think that that's one of the things that the media is missing, and I think they do it intentionally. And when
Mhm.
we talk about us as Black press and what we do, we make sure that people talk about the things that they try to overlook about us because they want us to be monolith. Like they want us to be one thing. They want us to exist as to how they see us. But if that's the case, then every story that comes out about any Black or brown player that's playing in any sport is always going to be like how the LA Times has written it.
Yeah, how
And
about
that's
that?
not fair to us.
No, not at all. And so Tacuma, the final four on both sides is set. We're talking about women right now, so let's keep it there. North Carolina State versus South Carolina. Speaking of Dawn Staley, 7 o'clock Friday, and then that's followed by number three UConn against Iowa, which is at 9:30 on Friday. What can we expect Friday night in the women's Final Four?
Wow. People forgot about Paige. They forgot about her.
Come on, come on, come
They
on.
forgot about her. She showed up and showed out. I love Juju Watkins, and I even love the moment at the end where she went over to her to give her encouragement. Juju clearly in tears after the loss, but Paige was such a gamer in the final stretch. She put the team on her back, hit clutch shots. She's so tough. And it's just going to be a gritty game. I'm excited about these two stars, and I like Caitlin Clark. I think not only is she a great shooter, she has a great court vision as well. I love her passing ability, how she sees the game as well. So I'm looking forward to a strong tilt. But when we go on the other side, I just think about Dawn Staley and the program she's put together, that program that sustained a lot of losses of players leaving, graduating, playing professionally, and how she's still able to get them to play at a high level. One of my favorite coaching moments of the year from was when Camila Cordosa, I believe, she had like invited her parents, her family, I'm sorry, to come
That was
and
beautiful.
surprise
That
her.
was so
And then
beautiful.
right. And then she ended up hitting the game-winning shot, right?
Come on.
In
Yep.
the SEC tournament. Um, that speaks to again showing up for your players. We gave the example of Coach Mulkey probably should have doing that with her
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
players, but we
Mm-hmm.
see that with Dawn, right? She
Mm-hmm.
exemplifies servant leadership to me,
Mm-hmm.
and so I'm excited. I'm excited about Friday. But I think what happened last night is an all
Yeah.
timer for the game.
Yeah.
I'm
It was
so
hot.
excited. It is.
Last night was amazing. Like I couldn't sleep. I'm gonna be honest with you. I lost some sleep last night because I was like, it wasn't even from disappointment. It was more so like, wow, I've really been a fan of this sport or these sports. And this is where it's gotten to now. Like,
Mm-hmm.
to even see someone like Shamika Holdsclaw really actively like
Yeah.
live tweet and do all of the things, because she usually comes in on the back end. And shout out to Shamika, she's one of my good friends. But but I point that out because that's when people really started listening to those of us who said there's a difference in Caitlin Clark and there's a difference in Paige, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Paige is more of an all around.
Yeah.
She gonna get you on
Right,
defense.
right.
She gonna get you on the board. She gonna do whatever. Like she's all around dominant, right? Caitlin, baby is gonna she's gonna get her points, okay? And I'm not discrediting her, but what helps Caitlin do what she does is when her teammates work according to the plan. Because that little girl, Martin, I don't know what her first name is. I'm gonna know about a Final Four, I promise.
Yeah, yeah.
But Martin, that girl can rebound,
Oh
and
yeah.
she is not the tallest person, but she is aggressive under that board. So I give them
Tracks
credit for
well,
that.
like Dennis Rodman.
Okay, okay, but if I'm being honest here, okay, across both Final Fours, I need UConn to advance. That's it. In the story. I need UConn to do what they need to
Well,
do, and I need both
you
of them to advance. And then I need NC State to play UConn in the men's for the championship.
DJ
And
Burns.
I'm gonna need South Carolina versus UConn in the women's, because I want to see Paige versus South Carolina. I want to see, I want to see that dynamics. I want to see how that plays out, because I just think at this point, yes, Iowa got past LSU, and that's all fine and good because this is their year to make that move. But I just don't see them getting past UConn. I just
well,
don't.
I tell you what, on the men's side, like you said, NC State, Purdue, Alabama, UConn, that is Saturday. And for NC State, it's so interesting because it's going to be their first national semifinal since they won it all under Jim Valvano in 1983. We all
Isn't that
remember,
amazing? Isn't that amazing?
right?
Like,
Yeah, and we
I
remember
need
Jim
this to
Valvano running
happen.
all around the court. He didn't know what to
Yes,
do with
I need
himself.
this to happen, and I need their coach to do the same thing.
The same thing. Yeah, it would just right. We all know the sad but sad but upbuilding story of Jim Valvano. And we can always remember him beating, what was it? It was the Georgetown team, right? That he beat for the national title in 1983. Was it Georgetown?
I,
Um,
I have to go
Whatever
back.
it was a huge upset. They
Yeah.
were not, or was it Houston? One of those two. It was one of those two giants that Valvano's team beat in
I think
1983
it
for
was
the
Houston.
championship. It
It
was
was
Houston.
Houston.
Five slammer jammer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But those are stories. So it's stories like that, of course, that people romanticize when it comes to sports, right? Because they bring out in some cases, humanity, what's real. And North Carolina did that in 1983. So it's so funny. Dawn wants North Carolina to go to the finals on both sides. So
Basically, the Carolinas need to make it, but as far as I'm concerned, North Carolina State women, I need y'all to go back home. We appreciate you. Thank you for coming, but I need y'all to go back home, and we'll see you next year. We'll just see you next year.
right.
This isn't no shade to y'all. Y'all did the thing. Appreciate you, but your stop has come. Um, but also too for South Carolina, I need them to understand that that's not going to be an easy battle. It's not. And me personally, between if I had to choose a game that I'm really going to really tune into, it's going to be that one, North Carolina and South Carolina. And I'll just wish everybody luck in the UConn and Iowa game. And then go from there. But yeah, I genuinely want to see on the women's side South Carolina playing UConn, because I want to see a different dynamic. I want to see a different power play there. I want to see
Mhm.
a different, because the storyline technically should be different, right? It should be different. It should be, where you're focusing in on the whole teams versus just the star players, because you have no choice but to see that. Because also Paige is somebody who she's not going to allow the narrative to be single-handedly about her. She's going to want to uplift her teammates and, what they're doing. And you've got players playing with injuries. You've got people on the bench, like, who aren't going to be able to play. Like, they're going with few
Right.
players than anybody else. So that's the thing that we need to talk about, is how these women who every day they're being challenged on social media or online about whether or not they can keep up with the men, or whether or not they can play ball against,
They blowing the
a college
men's
men's
team
basketball
out
team.
for.
They can ball, and you want to watch it. So just be truthful about that.
Tacoma, at this stage, injuries aside, all of the other stuff aside, people they love to talk about upsets, but at this stage, we Final Four for each, men and women. Are there real upsets to be had here, or you just tip your hat? The winner is the winner.
I think the winner is the winner. I think on the men's side, what we saw, what UConn did to Illinois was just a total destruction of a very talented offensive team. And I was going to say on the men's side, it's kind of got this throwback feel to me, because there've been, such a guards game in the tournament, especially, but we're seeing these big men really emerge and really be the focal points for their team. Shout out to DJ Burns. I've been loving seeing him come to the forefront, his story. He's such a nimble, very skilled big man. I love seeing him operate in the paint. Zach Edey of Purdue, you have to give props to as well. And then David Klingon, I think his name is, for UConn. And to me, UConn looks like the most complete team on the men's side. They have a very strong chance to repeat. And I don't think no team's done that since the Florida teams from, I think, in the late 2000s, like 2006, 7, 8, around there.
Oh hell, don't bring up them Florida teams, because baby, there was one year them Florida teams beat Ohio State in basketball and football, and I don't want to
Yeah,
talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. Like, you just triggered
yeah.
me. Like,
You triggered Dawn. Hey, real quick, I gotta ask this question before we go. There was this commentary, and I don't want to focus on Deion Sanders at all, but
oh,
he had
I
talked
thought you were
about
talking about Paul Pierce.
no, 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 not Paul Pierce
Yeah.
today, but
Okay. Go ahead.
Dion was talking about Shadur and his other star athlete. That is, who I'm talking
Travis
about. I can't think of
Hunter.
his name. Yeah, and perhaps dictating in the NFL draft where they go. Um, eh, Briefly, let's go into that, because only a few players have been able to force a trade. I talked about Kobe Bryant and what he did. He didn't want to go to Charlotte, and he had identified the Lakers immediately and said he wasn't playing for anyone except the Lakers. And before, I mean, Charlotte did draft him, but immediately traded him to the Lakers before he could have a chance to even sit down and talk contract. Eli Manning, I believe Elway did the same. But it's rare. The some say it's a plantation type situation, and others just look at it like, they're in a spot where, unless you are a Kobe Bryant, unless you are a Eli Manning, or better yet, a John Elway, you have really no leverage. Is the system Does this system finally needs to change?
I mean, I've been saying that, I've covered the draft for years, actually full decade or more, and, seeing the best of the best. I just have to say that one thing that Dion is consistent in is he's consistent in believing in his children, and he's consistent in believing in his players. Okay. I'm not going to take away from that. I've never taken away from his ability to be able to coach his children, and his ability to be able to coach their peers or the players that come to him. But I do think that it's a bold thing for him to say out loud versus allowing it to play behind the scenes. And the
Mhm.
reason why I say that is because if this does go the way that they want it to go, watch how many more players would try to do this, and
Mhm.
it's not going to work in their favor, and it's going to backfire, and it's going to be a horrible response to someone who single-handedly at every level that his children have gotten to has been able to dictate how they are accepted or received into said league or whatever or conference. This man has the ability, he has the ability, the likability, he has the connections to make this happen. And I just think it would have been strategically more smart for him to do this quietly in those meetings with those NFL scouts and, some of these, team owners, the GMs and stuff, because that's not something that they would want publicly out there, to where it would encourage the next generation of players who feel as if they have the capability to do the same thing and come out and say that. Because once you get one too many black athletes doing some of the same things in the league, that's when they start making rules to change shit.
Mhm. Are they
Mhm.
good enough? Tacoma, are Dion's guys good enough to dictate? If say the Miami Dolphins, they don't want to play for Miami Dolphins, say that, and they have the first pick in the draft or the second pick. Are they good enough to force Miami to shy away from them or draft and trade them?
Are they good enough? Well, I definitely think Shador Sanders is going to be highly drafted. But Travis Hunter is a rare athlete. He plays both ways, right?
Mhm.
In a modern college game, which is extremely difficult to do, and he does both at a very high level. And so it's going to depend on the level of player, the stature, right? I agree with Dawn in that maybe that should have been kept behind the scenes because that could be used later on to impact these players' draft stocks, right? But I also think that the system as it stands, I think certain players may need it who may be underrated, who may need that off season to go participate at the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Combine to boost their stock. I'll tell you a quick story. In 2014, before the 2014 draft, there was an underrated, undersized defensive tackle from the University of Pittsburgh that started generating a buzz during the offseason, during the Senior Bowls. And people were like saying, hey, the guys at this practice can't guard this kid named Aaron Donald. This guy named Aaron Donald is eating everybody up. His performance led him to be drafted in the top 15 picks, and he just retired now, is probably one of the best all time at his position, and certainly the best player to emerge from the 2014 draft. So to me, it depends on who you are. If you can pull it off, hey, kudos to you. But I think that with Dion, I agree with Dawn. Like, I hope this doesn't backfire and hurt his son and
Because
Travis Hunter.
draft slots are money, right? I
Their
mean, if you
money.
draft, depends on
Correct.
where you draft it.
I mean, but
It depends on how much you make.
we
You're
saw that
guaranteed.
when Gino was falling in the draft. We saw that
Yeah,
with certain players when they started falling in the past few drafts. And that right there is a telltale that there was something that everybody knew behind the
right.
scenes that wasn't made publicly known.
Mhm.
Which, to be fair, that's generally how the system technically works. You
Oh yeah,
allow the
absolutely.
negotiation process to kind of dictate how much further you are, because there are times when you find out who goes between the first and the five picks, and you're like, now wait a minute, I didn't have them on my list to go in the
Right,
first to five picks,
right.
but then when you look at their agent, you're like, oh, that person walked in the room
Right.
and sold them. That person walked in the room and made sure that that happened. And I get it. Everybody, I think in this moment, I think Dion wants to have that black quarterback moment. But to be fair, if I'm honest with you, there are other quarterbacks that are way better than his son. I'm just gonna say
Mhm.
that. And I feel like he could have used more time, you know, to
So
go back or whatever. But at this point, it is a money. It's like a money grab at this point. The goal was to get to Colorado, to get to the league, to get to before
mhm.
more eyes, to get more exposure and all of the things. Okay, you did that. Now, can you just go back to the drawing board and do things how everybody else does them? But then, two, you're gonna have people coming for me saying, "Well, what if Dion's trying to shake the system up? What if things do need to change? Okay, that's fine. But there are certain aspects of the process in the system that is probably still going to remain the same. And they're going to make an example out of you if you continue to stand up to say, oh, I want this, I want that. Oh, okay. Well, we'll see how that works.
Well, here's the deal. Here's the deal. So if you are the number one pick, currently your contract is 41.2 million. If you drop to say the fifth slot, it's 34.5 million. If you're pushed all the way down to 10, it's 22.6. And like you mentioned, Geno Smith. I remember Geno Smith was like he was supposed to be a top two or top three, and he wound up down in the 20s if I remember it correctly. And if you're down to say 20, it's $15 million, the contract in total. We're talking. If you drop out to the 31st pick, it's just $12 million. And we're talking about um, the entire contract. And this is where you start getting away from guaranteed money. So this is where it could cost if you start scaring teams who have the first pick, the second pick, and the third team pick away from you. So you're right. I agree with both of you that it would serve best for Dion to have worked behind the scenes on that. Because now you might be in a situation where whoever has the number one pick, they may be looking at a Shadur or the two-way star there from Colorado, and then saying, okay, he's not going to play with me. They might have they might decide I won't pick him because they would be doing him a favor to pick him and trade him to where he wants, right? And he's dropping because the first 10, 12 teams, he's like, I'm not interested. So, you know, it's a
I
dangerous
just,
game. I agree.
it is very dangerous. And I just think, I understand how pathetic, Dion thinks he is, right? And I understand that he has a vision and he has a
Mhm.
plan. And God knows if this works out, we're going to be back on this show talking about it. um, but to me, a lot of times with the vision that you're giving, everybody's not supposed to know.
Yeah.
Right.
Everybody's probably not going to support you in general. So in the essence of maybe everybody's not supposed to know your vision, everybody's probably not going to support you. Why don't you figure out how to do it the way that they do things and then go behind there and say, okay, this is how we did it. This is how I can do it for my next couple of players. This is how I can go about working with my other type of players. Because another thing that I haven't heard being announced is whether or not these two young men have agents. So is your coach your agent? Because now what that's going to open up a door to is the NC2A trying to control a coach's ability to deal with draft stock in the next league, because now they don't want more coaches involved in something like that, to where eventually if a coach makes enough money to get said players to the league like that, they're going to leave their jobs.
Mhm.
Like, so it's a domino effect, Stacey, to where it's like, on one hand, I'm all for a black man standing up for his children and for players who need someone to advocate for them. But I'd rather the storyline about Shador and Travis be about how Dion bought into them, how Dion built them, how Dion positioned them, and how they're now taking the likes of that and going to the next league. That's what this narrative should be about. It shouldn't be about Dion. And that's what pisses me off about him, is because everything is made about him.
I'll give you the
You've already
last
played.
word.
You're done. Like, stop.
Yeah, I want to chime in. There's another way to do it, right? In this very draft, Marvin Harrison Jr. said, "Look, I'm not participating in the combine. I'm not running a 40. If you want me to work out for you, I could do that privately. I'm going to get ready for the football season because I trust enough what I put on tape that I'm going to be a top 5 pick in the draft, right?" And he's done that. That's been announced, but it's kind of been under the radar, right? And he's in a way controlling the narrative as well and changing the system in his own way. And I think that's interesting. I mean, he can do that. I mean, he's the son of Marvin Harrison,
And go
right?
Buckeyes. Let me bring that in there.
There
Go
you go. Go
Buckeyes. Yes.
Buckeyes. Yep.
Well, Tacuma Roeback of the Chicago Defender, the managing editor of Chicago Defender. We appreciate you
Thank you.
joining Black Presses. Let it be known, and of course, the one and only Dawn Montgomery. Follow Dawn on social media. Not that she really needs that announcement.
I
Uh,
really don't.
but we say it
Like,
anyway.
don't follow
Follow
me.
the Chicago Defender. How about that?
Yes,
Follow the
follow
Chicago
the
Defender.
Chicago Defender. Yes, please.
Dawn is also she certainly is a big advocate of the black press. Always has
Mm-hmm.
been, and I
Mm-hmm.
dare say always probably will be. Thanks so much,
Oh, you better
Dawn.
know
Thanks
it.
so much, Tacuma. We
It'll be on
appreciate
my
you.
tombstone.
It'll be on her too. So look at
Black
that.
press advocate.
Tacuma, give everybody our regards out in the Windy City, and we will see you guys again on the
Sure
show
will. All right.
soon.